For years, I had dreamed of owning a quiet piece of land outside the city, a place where I could build a home, plant a garden, and enjoy the peace of nature. And finally, after years of hard work, I had it a beautiful 20-acre property in the town of Meadowbrook. But when I finally visited my land, expecting to see untouched grass and rolling hills, I found something else. A massive ranch. Barns, fences, stables full of horses. And the worst part? The HOA had built it. On my land. I had bought the land 3 years ago. At the time, I was too busy with work to do anything with it. But I kept paying the property taxes, knowing that one day I'd finally build my dream home there. That day had finally come. I drove out to Meadowbrook, excited to finally see my land again. But as I pulled onto the dirt road leading to my property, my excitement turned to confusion. The land wasn't empty anymore. There were fences where there shouldn't be fences, buildings where there shouldn't be buildings, and worst of all, a giant wooden sign that read, "Willow Ranch, private property, HOA members only." My stomach dropped. This had to be a mistake. The ranch that shouldn't exist. I parked my truck at the entrance and got out. The place looked like a fully functioning ranch. There were horses grazing, workers moving hay bales, and even a few fancy-looking cars parked outside a massive white barn. I marched toward the entrance when a man in a cowboy hat stepped in front of me. "You lost, buddy?" he asked, chewing on a toothpick. I squared my shoulders. "No, this is my land." The man laughed. "Nah, this here is Willow Ranch property of the Meadowbrook HOA. I pulled out my phone, opened my property deed, and held it up. "This land belongs to me." His smile disappeared. "You got the wrong place, pal." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Listen, I don't know what's going on here, but I own this land. I have the papers to prove it. Now, I need to talk to whoever's in charge." The man sighed and motioned toward the barn. "You want to talk to the boss? Go ahead, but good luck." Inside the barn was an office setup, with a huge wooden desk in the middle. Sitting behind the desk was a woman in a red power suit. She looked up, clearly annoyed that I was there. "Can I help you?" she asked. I placed my deed on her desk. "This is my land," I said firmly. "Why is there a ranch here?" She glanced at the papers, then leaned back in her chair. "You must be Mr. Carter." I frowned. "How do you know my name?" She smiled. "We keep track of all property owners in Meadowbrook." Something about the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. "So you know this land is mine," I said. "Yet, you built a ranch on it?" Her smile didn't fade. "We reclaimed underutilized land for the betterment of the community." My jaw clenched. "Reclaimed? This was never yours to begin with." She sighed dramatically. "Look, Mr. Carter, we're reasonable people. Why don't you just sell the land to us? We'll pay a fair price." I shook my head. "Not for sale." Her smile dropped. "Well, that's unfortunate," she said, "because we're not going anywhere." I was fuming. They were trespassing on my land, and they knew it. I grabbed my paperwork. "You're going to hear from my lawyer." The woman chuckled. "Go ahead. But let me remind you, Mr. Carter." She leaned forward, her eyes cold and calculating. "This is Meadowbrook, and the HOA always wins." A shiver ran down my spine. But she had no idea who she was messing with. Because my brother, he was a judge, and they were about to learn the hard way that nobody steals from my family and gets away with it. I left the ranch fuming. The audacity of that woman, the HOA president, telling me they had reclaimed my land like it was some abandoned property. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had built a ranch on land they didn't own and were now acting like they had a right to it. Well, they were about to get a nasty surprise. I climbed into my truck and drove straight to my brother's house. Because if the HOA thought they could just walk all over me, they had no idea who they were messing with. My brother, Daniel Carter, was a circuit court judge. He wasn't just any judge. He was sharp, relentless, and hated corruption. And right now, I needed every bit of his expertise. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, his expression immediately turned serious. "What's wrong?" he asked. I stepped inside and dropped the property deed on his coffee table. "Someone built a damn ranch on my land." His eyes narrowed. "Who?" "The Meadowbrook HOA." Daniel let out a slow breath, his lawyer brain already kicking into gear. "Tell me everything." I walked him through everything: the fenced-off land, the ranch, the HOA president's smug attitude, and their absurd claim that I should just sell it to them. By the time I finished, Daniel was already flipping through my deed and pulling up property records on his laptop. He frowned. "This is bad," he muttered. My stomach tightened. "How bad?" He turned the laptop screen toward me. "They filed a false claim of adverse possession 2 years ago." I blinked. "What?" Adverse possession, also known as squatters' rights, meant that if someone occupied land openly for a certain number of years, they could claim ownership of it. But in my case, the law required at least 10 years of continuous use, and I had never abandoned my land. "They're banking on the fact that you never visited," Daniel explained. "They probably falsified records to make it look like they've been maintaining the land for years." I clenched my fists. "That's fraud." "Exactly." A slow smirk spread across his face. "And I think I know how to bury them." The first step? We needed to expose their fraud. Daniel instructed me to dig up every document related to my land tax records, purchase agreements, anything that proved I had maintained legal ownership. Luckily, I had everything. I had paid my property taxes every single year, and I had receipts to prove it. Next, Daniel reached out to his legal connections to pull any filings the HOA had made regarding my property. What he found was infuriating. They had doctored maintenance records, claiming they had been improving the land for years. They even had fake work orders for fencing, irrigation, and barn construction dated before they ever set foot on my land. It was blatant fraud. And it was about to backfire spectacularly. The next morning, I woke up to find an official letter taped to my front door. It was from the Meadowbrook HOA, and when I opened it, my blood boiled. Notice of violation. Dear Mr. Carter, it has come to our attention that you are trespassing on HOA-owned property. You are hereby ordered to cease all unauthorized access to Willow Ranch immediately. Failure to comply will result in legal action. They were trying to intimidate me. They knew I had caught onto their fraud, and now they were trying to flip the script. I stormed into my truck and drove straight back to the ranch, confronting the HOA president. I pulled up to the ranch entrance and got out. The same smug cowboy from last time stood by the gate. "Didn't I tell you to stay off?" I shoved the HOA letter in his face. "Tell your boss I'm here." The cowboy eyed me for a moment, then sighed and stepped aside. Inside the barn office, the HOA president was waiting already, sipping her coffee like she had won. "Ah, Mr. Carter," she said smoothly. "Did you get our notice?" I tossed it onto her desk. "This is nonsense, and you know it," I snapped. She leaned back. "It's protocol. We can't have people trespassing on private property." I narrowed my eyes. "You mean my property?" She shrugged. "That's up for the courts to decide." I clenched my fists. "You really think you're going to win?" I asked. She smirked. "The Meadowbrook HOA has never lost a legal battle." I took a step closer. "You just made a big mistake," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" I leaned in. "My brother is a judge, and you just walked into a legal nightmare." For the first time, her confident expression faltered. That night, Daniel and I filed a lawsuit, not just for trespassing, but for fraud, illegal construction, and property theft. We sent official cease and desist orders to the HOA, demanding they vacate the land immediately. And then, we did something even better. We contacted local news stations. Because if there was one thing HOAs hated more than lawsuits, it was bad publicity. The next morning, my phone blew up with messages. Apparently, a local reporter had run the story, exposing how the Meadowbrook HOA had stolen private land. The headline? Local HOA faces fraud allegations over stolen land. It was only the beginning, because now the entire town was watching. And the HOA? They were starting to panic. The moment that news story broke, the HOA panicked. For the first time, their smug confidence cracked. They had expected me to just roll over, to be another victim too scared to fight back. But now, their fraud was out in the open, and I wasn't backing down. By the next morning, the news was everywhere. The local station's investigative team had picked up the story, airing footage of the illegally built ranch alongside a headline that read, "Homeowner fights HOA over alleged land theft." The HOA was suddenly on the defensive. Their usual strategy bully, intimidate, and delay wasn't working this time. They tried damage control, releasing a carefully worded statement claiming this was a misunderstanding and that they had acted in good faith. But the public wasn't buying it. The comments under the news articles were brutal. "HOAs think they can do whatever they want. I hope this guy sues them into the ground. How do you accidentally build a ranch on someone else's land? This is corruption, plain and simple." And the best part? More victims started coming forward. A day after the story aired, I got a message from a guy named Steve Ramirez. He was an older man, in his 60s, and had lived in Meadowbrook before selling his home a few years back. We met at a local diner, and the moment he sat down, he shook his head. "They pulled the same stunt on me," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. Steve sighed. "I owned a small lot on the edge of the community. Nothing big, just a patch of land I kept as an investment. One day, I went to check on it, and the HOA had built a playground on it." I stared at him. "They built a playground on your land?" He nodded. "Told me I could either donate the land or they'd fight me in court. Said it would take years to sort out, and I'd probably lose." I clenched my fists. "So what happened?" He looked down at his coffee. I caved. I didn't have the money for a long legal battle, so I signed it over for pennies. My jaw tightened. This wasn't just a one-time thing. The HOA had been doing this for years, bullying people into surrendering their land. And I was going to stop them. The day after my meeting with Steve, I got a call from Karen Monroe, the HOA president. Her tone was completely different now. Gone was the smug arrogance. Now, she sounded nervous. "Mr. Carter," she began, "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot." I smirked. "You mean the foot where you built an illegal ranch on my land and then tried to kick me off it?" A pause. "I'm calling to offer a resolution," she said carefully. "We'd like to discuss settlement." I leaned back in my chair. "Interesting," I said. "And what kind of settlement are we talking about?" "We're prepared to buy the land from you at a very generous price." I nearly laughed. "You mean you want me to sell you my land? The land you stole so you can legitimize your fraud?" She hesitated. "Mr. Carter, let's be reasonable. You've stirred up a lot of controversy, but these things have a way of dying down. The media will move on, and when they do, you'll still be left with this mess. Wouldn't it be better to walk away with a fat paycheck?" I could hear the desperation in her voice. They wanted me to take their hush money. They wanted me to disappear before this turned into something bigger. I grinned. "Oh, I'm going to get a big payout, all right," I said. "But it's not going to come from selling my land. It's going to come from suing you into the ground." I hung up. The next morning, Daniel and I filed the official lawsuit. We were suing the HOA for fraud, trespassing, illegal construction, harassment, falsifying property records, and the best part? The lawsuit was publicly available. The local news picked up the story immediately. Homeowner sues HOA for land theft, exposes pattern of fraud. The HOA was now in full crisis mode. And they started making mistakes. A few days later, I woke up to find a bright orange sticker on my front door. It was an HOA violation notice. Apparently, my grass was too long. Then, the next day, I got another notice, this time for having trash bins visible from the street. They were harassing me, trying to break me down. But they had no idea that every petty little stunt was just adding fuel to the lawsuit. I documented everything. Every notice, every email, every ridiculous fine they tried to impose. They thought they could bully me into submission. Instead, they were digging their own grave. One evening, I was heading home when I noticed something strange. A black SUV was parked across the street. At first, I ignored it. But then I noticed it was always there. The next day, it was parked outside my gym. The day after that, outside my workplace. Someone was following me. I decided to confront them. I pulled into my driveway and waited. Sure enough, the SUV rolled up a few minutes later. I stepped out of my truck and marched over. As I approached, the driver sped off, but not before I caught a glimpse of the logo on the license plate frame Meadowbrook HOA Security. They had crossed the line. It was one thing to harass me with fines. It was another to stalk me. And now, they had just handed me more evidence for my lawsuit. That night, I told Daniel what happened. His face turned dark. "This just went from a civil case to a criminal one," he said. And the next morning, he made a phone call, not just to the court, but to the State Attorney General's office, because if the HOA thought they were above the law, they were about to get a brutal reality check. The moment my brother Daniel made that phone call, things started moving fast. The HOA thought they were playing a long game, wearing me down with petty harassment. But they had underestimated who they were dealing with, because now, they weren't just facing a lawsuit, they were facing a full-scale investigation. It started with a single email, then a phone call, and before the HOA even realized what was happening, their worst nightmare became reality. The State Attorney General's office had officially opened an inquiry into Meadowbrook HOA. A few days later, a team of investigators showed up at the HOA's main office, armed with subpoenas. And suddenly, the people who had spent years bullying homeowners had nowhere to hide. At first, the HOA pretended to cooperate. They handed over some documents, made a big show about being transparent. But behind the scenes, they were panicking. I got a call from Steve Ramirez, the homeowner, who had told me about how the HOA stole his land for a playground. "You're not gonna believe this," he said. "I just got a call from someone on the HOA board. They offered me hush money to keep quiet." I nearly dropped my phone. "They what?" "They said if I signed a non-disclosure agreement, they'd cut me a check for 50,000. I laughed. That's when I knew. They were desperate, because if they were trying to buy silence, that meant they were hiding something much worse. And I was going to find out exactly what it was. 2 days later, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "HOA corruption. I have proof." I opened it. Inside was a message from someone named Lisa Caldwell. She claimed to be a former HOA board member and who had resigned after she saw what was happening behind the scenes. We arranged to meet at a local coffee shop. When I arrived, I found a woman in her late 40s, looking nervous but determined. She wasted no time. "The HOA has been committing fraud for years," she said, "and I have the documents to prove it." She slid a flash drive across the table. "What's on here?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "Everything. Fake land records, forged signatures, bribery payments." My heart pounded. This was it. The smoking gun. The evidence that would bring them down for good. Once Daniel reviewed the files, he knew exactly what to do. He sent the entire flash drive to the Attorney General's office, and the fallout was immediate. Within 48 hours, 3 HOA board members had resigned. One of them even hired a lawyer and started cooperating with investigators. And as soon as one person broke ranks, the whole system started to crumble. Karen Monroe, the HOA president, tried to act tough, claiming this was all a misunderstanding. But that didn't last long, because the investigators weren't just looking at my land anymore. They were uncovering dozens of case homeowners who had been bullied, scammed, and forced to give up their land under false pretenses. And the state wasn't going to let it slide. One morning, I got another unexpected phone call. This time, it wasn't from Karen Monroe, it was from the HOA's attorney. "Mr. Carter," the man said in a smooth, rehearsed voice, "I represent Meadowbrook HOA, and we'd like to discuss a settlement." I smirked. Another payoff attempt. "What kind of settlement?" I asked. "We're prepared to offer you double the market value of your land in exchange for dropping all legal action." I let that sink in. They were so desperate to make this go away that they were offering me twice what my land was worth. I pretended to think it over. Then I said, "Nah." A pause. "I beg your pardon?" I said, "Nah. I don't want your dirty money. I want to see you in court." And then I hung up. Less than a week later, it happened. The first set of arrests. The Attorney General's office, working with local law enforcement, issued warrants for Karen Monroe, HOA President, Greg Dawson, HOA Treasurer, Ellen Reeves, HOA Secretary. The charges? Fraud, conspiracy, forgery. And the best part? The news cameras were there when they were taken away in handcuffs. The arrests sent shockwaves through the community. Homeowners who had once been afraid of the HOA were now cheering in the streets. And then, the final nail in the coffin. A judge issued a court order declaring the HOA's claim to my land invalid, which meant the ranch they built was now mine. Every fence, every barn, every piece of equipment, all of it belonged to me. The HOA had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building that ranch. And now? They had to watch as I took it over. I made sure to film myself walking across my land, grinning ear to ear, as I posted a simple message online. Justice. The video went viral. And the HOA? Completely destroyed. After everything settled, Daniel and I sat on the porch, looking over my land. The land I had fought for. The land that belonged to me all along. "You really did it," Daniel said, sipping his coffee. "We did it," I corrected him. "I couldn't have done this without you," he smiled. "So, what are you going to do with the ranch?" I thought about it. Then I grinned. "I think I'll turn it into a sanctuary for people who've been screwed over by HOAs." Daniel laughed. "That's actually brilliant." And just like that, the land the HOA tried to steal became the land that helped take them down. The dust had finally settled. The HOA was in shambles, the key players facing prison time, and the illegal ranch they built on my land. It became mine. But even with my victory, there was one final battle left to fight, deciding what to do next. Would I simply enjoy my land in peace? Or would I use this moment to create something bigger? I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't done making them regret ever crossing me. I was sipping my morning coffee on the porch when my phone rang. The caller ID made me chuckle. It was Karen Monroe's lawyer, the same one who had tried to offer me a settlement before she got arrested. "Curious," I answered. "Mr. Carter," the lawyer said, sounding more nervous than before, "I have a rather unusual request." "Oh, and what might that be?" I asked, pretending I didn't already know. He cleared his throat. "Karen wants to negotiate a plea deal. She's willing to provide more evidence on corruption within the HOA in exchange for a lighter sentence." I smirked. "So, let me get this straight," I said. "She wants to sell out her own people to save herself?" The lawyer sighed. "Essentially, yes." I leaned back in my chair. "And what do you expect me to do about that?" "Well, given your involvement in the case, the prosecution is willing to consider your opinion on the matter." I laughed. They actually thought I'd help Karen Monroe after everything she did. No deal, I said. She made her bed. Now she gets to rot in it. And with that, I hung up. The news spread fast. Karen's attempt to cut a deal had failed, and the prosecution was going for the maximum sentence. But while she and the other HOA officials prepared for years behind bars, I was focused on building something new. With my land officially restored, I had a bold idea, one that would turn the HOA's biggest mistake into something truly powerful. I reached out to Steve Ramirez and a few other homeowners who had suffered under the HOA's tyranny. Let's do something the HOA never could, I told them. Let's create a real community one where people actually help each other instead of extorting them. The idea? Turn the ranch into a community-run cooperativa place where homeowners could gather, grow food, host events, and support each other. The response was overwhelming. People loved it. The same land that the HOA had tried to steal would now be a symbol of their downfall. And the best part? I was going to name it the Freedom Ranch. The grand opening of Freedom Ranch. The day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony was nothing short of poetic. Dozens of people gathered, homeowners, community members, even local news reporters who had covered the HOA scandal. Daniel stood beside me, grinning as we prepared to cut the ribbon. Who would have thought, he said, shaking his head. A year ago, this land was an illegal HOA project, and now it's, well, this. I nodded. It's proof that the little guy can win, I said, no matter how powerful they think they are. With that, I raised the giant scissors, and with a single snip, Freedom Ranch was officially open. The crowd cheered. People shook my hand, thanked me, and even called me a hero. But I wasn't a hero. I was just a guy who refused to be pushed around. And now, the very land the HOA tried to steal was going to be used to help people like me, homeowners who just wanted a place to belong. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the state government. And inside? A single sentence that made my day. Meadowbrook HOA has been permanently dissolved. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. All the years they spent stealing, scamming, and bullying homeowners. Gone. Erased, never to return. And I made sure the world knew it. I posted the letter online with a single caption. Rest in peace, OA. You won't be missed. The post went viral. And the final cherry on top? The state ordered the remaining HOA funds to be distributed back to the homeowners, the same people they had spent years trying to control. It was poetic justice. And it was beautiful. Looking back, I realized something important. This wasn't just about my land. It wasn't just about the HOA's corruption. It was about power and how easily it can be abused when good people don't fight back. The HOA thought they could intimidate me, wear me down, and make me give up. But they were wrong. Because when you take a man's land, you're not just taking property, you're taking his home, his history, his future. And a man will do whatever it takes to protect what's his. So, if there's one thing I hope people take from this story, it's this. Never let anyone bully you into giving up what's rightfully yours. Not an HOA, not a corrupt official, not anyone. Because at the end of the day, the only power they have is the power you let them have. A few months later, I took a drive to the old HOA officer, what was left of it. The building was abandoned, the windows boarded up, the parking lot empty. A for sale sign stood in front, collecting dust. I parked my truck, stepped out, and just took it all in. This place was once the heart of their power, the place where they made countless people suffer. Now, it was just another failed business, left to rot like the corrupt people who ran it. I took a deep breath, exhaled, and smiled. Justice had been served. And now? It was finally time to move on.